Okay, there we go. So is there anything I can send you that would be helpful that you need to see? Or that I can show you how to do? I think I included the bibliography page. Anybody struggle with that? You realize that there are pretty significant differences between Turabian footnotes and the source on the back. There are order of names. First of all, the sources are last name, comma, first name, where in the footnote it's first name, last name. There is some punctuation differences in the footnotes, mostly commas where there are periods on the other. You always italicize the title of the book. You put a title of an article in parentheses, and then you put the title of the journal in italics. Anything else? And of course, your footnote should go at the end of the sentence, not the beginning. I did see some of that this time. And if you have to go back and change footnotes, I don't know if I made this clear in the demonstration that I did. If you have to go back and change footnotes, the system will automatically renumber them. So you don't have to worry about, if you go back and change number 4 and do something different, it will automatically reshuffle the numbering. So that's the good thing about Word. It's very, very helpful. Any other issues?
So when I was doing my footnotes for my paper, Word automatically put the line in and the footnote.
Yes.
So was that correct, or would I? Okay.
You don't bother that. Let the system work for you. It will automatically leave the right amount of space at the bottom. You don't have to do any of that. It automatically puts the bottom line. It automatically places the footnote. What you do have to do in the footnotes is you have to manually change the font size from 12 to 10. And then you have to do your own formatting. Like the footnote at the bottom, the first line, including the footnote number, is tabbed over one tab. And then if there's other lines to it, then it will be left justified. It is single spaced, and then you have one single space between sources on the footnotes. On the back page, on the sources, they are single spaced. And in that case, the first line is left justified and all other lines are tabbed in one. And there should be single space and then one space between. And then they are put in alphabetical order by the author's last name on the back page. You should have a footnote, at least one, for every source you have on the back page. And remember that you need to keep your primary sources and your secondary sources distinguished. I still have people that are struggling with what a primary source is. If you have any questions, I won't beat you to death if you don't need that. But if you need to talk about what primary sources are, I'd be glad to do that as well. Primary sources are really hard to come by. They're scarce as hen's teeth. But you will learn, like you do in Roman history, you got tons of stuff, right? Or Greek history, you got all the philosophers, you got the historians. But if you're doing Sumer, Egypt has quite a number. The Book of the Dead, a lot of different things that they have, but you have to really look for them. And it takes a little time. Now, I understand I haven't used Southern New Hampshire Library, but I understand that they have ways to help you find primary sources. You can talk to the Writing Center as well. I really encourage you to try to get done with your milestones and turn them into the Writing Center and let them look at them and give you some feedback. I really encourage you to use Grammarly. Grammarly, if you'll do Grammarly and the Microsoft Office spell check, you'll be really in good shape, I think. Anyone else? Anything else? And then your writing, we're all different. And like I said before, there is no finish line in writing. We'll be working on how, improving ourselves the longest day we live. I mean, I got up this morning at 4 o'clock in the morning because I had something on my mind I couldn't get off. So I get up and write. When the inspiration strikes, I have to get up and write. So I'm doing a paper on the American Revolution, and I got to turn a prospectus in on Sunday. So I get up and did about 3/4 of it because it was just fresh in my mind. But kind of when you get the muse, that's the time to get up and do it, because it may not be there in the morning and the thoughts may be gone. So I really highly, I write papers in sections. I'll have a section on my mind, and I'll write it, and then somehow I'll go back and weave them all together. Christine, how are you doing with yours?
Sorry, trying to get unmuted.
Oh, I'm sorry. How are you doing with your paper?
I'm struggling. I am struggling with the primary sources still.
Okay, well, like I said, dig your very best. And when the day is done, if you don't have, it doesn't count. I mean, it didn't count up much at all. But if you don't have them, that's just it's part of the deal. I mean, you can understand what the life of a historian is like, because we write mainly from primary sources. We try not to use as many secondary, but trying to find them is like, finding gold. But and remind me again of your societies, which ones you're doing?
Anglo-Saxon, Norse, and Norman.
Okay. So
Norman I can find.
Uh-huh.
It's the Norse that I'm particularly struggling with.
Yeah, probably. How about the Anglo-Saxons? Most of
I
them
can find a little bit. Yeah.
Most of them were illiterate to begin with.
Right.
I mean, I don't know if the Venerable Bede, he wrote most of religious stuff, but he was like 700s. And that was a Catholic. I just got zoomed off. But you might want to check with the library as well. I don't know if they have a human component to our library or not, or if it's all virtual, but they might be able to help you some with that, or the writing center. I know if you could.
Yeah, like I said, like I have the whole idea and everything. It's just, yeah, like I said, finding the sources, because I mean,
Well,
my idea.
How are you doing with secondary?
Secondary, I can find some secondary sources.
Okay. One thing
That's going a little bit better.
did you try looking to see what they were using for primary?
Yes, and it's finding ones that I can tie into my idea.
Yeah.
So I'm trying. I am.
Well, make the best effort when the day's done. It's not going to burn the house down. So I was just telling Jonathan, I have taught freshman history forever, and this is a pretty weighty project for a 100 level class. So I don't grade it like it's a 300 level class. I want you to improve your writing, improve your research, and I'm happy with that. So it won't hurt you too badly if you don't find everything you need. But just
Okay.
do secondaries and go on.
I appreciate that.
And there's 3 of you out of a class of 30. This tells you the 27 of your classmates are either, lost in the weeds somewhere and won't ask for help. That's what gets me with teaching anyway, that nobody asks for help. They just turn it in, take their lumps, and go on, and at the very least you could talk about it. It helps to talk about it and realize that you're not alone, So feel free to ask anything about papers that come to mind. What about our materials this week? Anything you found interesting that you want to talk about for a minute? Most of it's on the interconnection of societies and how trade was the main culprit to diffuse, and that's the right word for technology. That technology diffused across cultural boundaries, national borders, whatever. And so you see a lot of this. We find pottery from, South America all the way in Washington, so it's now Washington State, which means that it got there somehow, right? It didn't carry itself there. So we understand that trade was happening. In the old world, the Silk Road was huge, where traders traveled and carried things. Of course, Marco Polo in about 1100 went all the way to China and was the first one to report back the astounding things that he saw in China. China was pretty much, depending on the dynasty, a closed court. They did not want their people trading with people outside of their group, so they pretty well closed the door. That was going to be, there's only one instance of that where they built 300 ships and went looking around and went all the way to Rome. And this had been during the Roman Empire, and they were appalled that the Romans thought they could rule themselves. And they went on to Africa, didn't find anything they wanted, turned around, went home, burned their ships and closed their doors. And they basically really didn't open them again until the 1800s, when the British came knocking, and they didn't have anything to trade. The British didn't have anything they wanted. So the Brits got them addicted to opium and started the Opium Wars. And so that's how they kind of broke through to China at that point. But ideas diffused like that, customs, technologies, things like gunpowder, the printing press, paper, all of that stuff, all kind of came through that direction. One of the things that did travel that was interesting was porcelain, Chinese porcelain. And we never were able to replicate it. We don't know enough about how it was done, and was done during different dynasties, did different things. If you've ever seen Chinese pottery, beautiful stuff and very, very expensive, but we have no idea how that works. Very little about it. Of course, the printing press and paper were other things that greatly fueled the Protestant Reformation, the Age of Enlightenment, being able to print things. When you had people that were studying the universe and they had no way to record what they had seen or what they were watching, everybody started at the same point. Once they had paper in the printing press, then these guys started sharing information, and so they could build off of each other's work. Copernicus was one. Kepler, Johann Kepler, and then Galileo, all those guys would benefit from that. Any comments you have to make on that, or questions, or anything you found interesting?
Well, Europeans were lucky there wasn't a copyright listed back then.
Yeah. So it just flowed across the line, But one of the things you'll learn about Westerners is we don't invent much, but we steal some great stuff. It's adopting and adapting. So we adopt the Chinese gunpowder, which they use for medicine, and we adapted it to make weaponry. Of course, they finally got around to weapons as well. The printing press, we adopt it. Gutenberg makes movable type. The paper we never had, so it was wonderful. We were using the old papyrus leather kind of stuff. That's really a hard way to keep things written down. Within Gutenberg's movable type, within the first 5 years, he had printed over 50 million books. And they were mostly religious things, of course, but people began to start writing. Columbus, of course, his journals got published all over Europe of his first encounter. Everybody was interested in what these strange new people were like. We've discovered an entire world. And you can understand that if you think about Mars. What if we suddenly realized that there are inhabitants on Mars? I mean, that'd be pretty astounding, would it not? What are they like? What language do they use? How do they dress? All that stuff. It's the same way with Columbus. And so what they read about in his journals were his first impressions of Native Americans, which were through European eyes. So they were either noble savages or savages. And so that got passed down to everybody. And so everybody coming after him looked at them through those same eyes. So it's quite interesting. Anyone else? Well, I don't want to keep you any longer than you need to be here. But I'm available if you want to call me, if you have a problem over the weekend getting something done to the next level. Let me know. I'll be glad to help if I can, or point you in the right direction. At any rate, right direction. But we got another person here. Oh, Owen's here. Hello, Owen.
Hey, how you doing, Mike? Dr. Mike?
Yeah, I was wondering if your dog sled got caught in the snow or something. So
No, I actually lost track of time. I was trying to finish up my rough draft and I looked at the clock and was like, oh no.
we just gone through the papers. You have any issues with papers you want to ask about or talk about?
So one thing I was kind of having an issue with is especially trying to come up with this, let me look at it, the structure dealing with women and what the consequences were. Because if you look at Egypt, they had amazing legal rights, but I mean, it's pretty hard to try and figure out what the positives were without using modern theory, like economic participation.
Sure.
Well,
one of the things you can talk about is the fact that Egypt did have, we know, 3 female pharaohs.
they did.
But how they rose to power kind of shows the limitations, because first of all, you didn't see Pharaoh even like we see the president in person on TV. They kept the great distance, and in some instances, since he was a living God, you did not see him in person and live, except the people right around him. So if you'll notice, the Nefertiti, Hatshepsut, and of course, Cleopatra was far down the road. She was in Roman times, and she was much more open. She was probably the only open one of them. But the first 2 dressed like men, and all of their images would have been of men in battle, and yet it was the 2 of them. So, you can talk about the limitations from that you draw from it. And I don't know that, I'm sure there's been some things written about the role of women in ancient Egypt. I think
I found it because there was head priestess and and all kinds of access like that, but it wasn't really talking about the positive. It's just stating that they were there. It was hard to find any quote unquote positives.
Sure.
Besides,
and you might just have to mention that they were there, and the information is very limited, but you do find them active as priestesses in the funerary cults. Of course, if you were a wife of Pharaoh, you got buried alive with him, so you could go into the next life. That wasn't very good.
That's kind of a negative.
But the people that carried him into the tomb got trapped too. They had trapdoors, so that when the people that carried him in, that knew where his body was, never got out alive.
Well, and so the interesting one I found was that they had the right to divorce a man.
Yeah. That was one of probably the only society like that.
For thousands of years. And
but
it's hard to mention what the positive of that is without going into, modern theory.
that's our problem is our looking back on history using 2023 glasses, and we don't, unless we can put ourselves in the time. And just like I think I mentioned the story of Moses in the Bible, how he could get in to see Pharaoh. You have to know all the stuff about pharaohs and how they were protected, and the fact that Moses was his half brother probably got him access, so he could go and come as he wanted to where nobody else could. But you have to, that's the beauty of knowing the context and of the stories, because it makes other stories come alive. It makes sense. But yeah, so some things you have to kind of ride around when you're writing history. If it's an area, number one, if you don't have time to really go after it, you can write around it. Or if it's limited knowledge, you can write around that. Just if you admit your limitations in a paper, you're all right. I mean, I think it helps some people to understand that, or if you mention, well, this might be a subject for a later inquiry or whatever, you'd have to go back and look at probably translations of papyrus and hieroglyphics to see what was mentioned about women. It'd be some pretty heavy primary document reading.
Yep. Perfect. Okay, thank you so much.
You're welcome. Anything about the materials this week that you found interesting? We were just talking about the diffusion of technology and things like porcelain and printing presses and how those got carried across lines and to different places. But
I actually haven't done any of the reading yet.
Okay.
So.
there is a great book, guys, if you're interested in technology or the history of technology and science, called Technology and Society, I believe is the name of it. I couldn't find it today. I was looking for my copy, and I hope I haven't sold it because it's friggin' expensive. But I used to give them to us when I was teaching the class. But it's got a lot of this in there about how technology diffuses and moves across societies, and how a lot of it are things we think we know, but it's exactly the opposite. And it's kind of a whodunit kind of book. Let me see, what if I got a title of that somewhere? I can give it to you. Science and Technology and Society, I believe. Because we think we think we know about it, but it's usually something else. It's usually a social issue. Let's see. No, it's not McGuinn. Oh, I don't see it, but anyway, it's a very interesting. If I find the book, I'll mention it in the things. But it's really a great book. It talks about the social side of technology and how it moves differently than we think it should. It's pretty interesting reading. All right, guys, anything else? Well, I'm available. All you gotta do is pick up the phone. If you don't do it, that's your problem. So I don't want to run after you and beg you to let me help you, but if you need it, I'm always there for that. Okay. And we'll keep moving on. This class is ending, getting over with pretty quickly. So we'll be at the end before you know it. All right, guys, we'll talk to you soon. I'll see you next week.
Awesome. Thanks for the help.
You're welcome.